Hey Kevin, love the response. So I think you make a really good point. Like there are certain clients, especially really large sites that have really complex functionality that are being very widely used, where the term launchpad site may be fairly loose in terms of like they're going to need a pretty built-out site. But I think it's still our job to try and figure out like what are the core functionality, even if that ends up being a lot of things. What is the core that we can launch with and slim it down? And so it might end up being obviously a larger project if it ends up having a lot of core functionality that it needs and that we find has been very impactful onto the business. One approach to consider, and we did this when I was at Savvy Panda, it worked really well, is so we would essentially identify, we'd essentially do like more of a site refresh, meaning we would take their existing site, in this case if it was on Joomla or WordPress or something like that, and we'd migrate it to the newest platform, and then we did essentially like a template and CSS update so that like the look and the feel was cleaner, newer, looked great, kind of just like the cosmetic side of it, or maybe even just like the wrapper, the header, footer, and around, and then CSS styling, just to give it a fresh feel. But did that really, really quickly. So migrated it. If you're using something like HubSpot, you don't necessarily have to migrate it. You maybe just are refreshing the template and design. And then from there, treated each individual section of the site. So you have like a blog section, maybe they have a product section, maybe they have like a forum, maybe they have whatever. So they have all these different sections. And we treated each section almost, we ran it through almost like its own individual like microsite, I guess, in some ways you could consider it. Meaning like we would run it through the same process that we would use for growth-driven design, where we have strategy, we do a strategy on that section, we would do a, I guess a launchpad site in the sense of like what core functionality and things like that for that section do we need, and then run it through that iteration cycle and kind of get it back up and running, and then at least when that piece of the process was done, that would be like phase one, would be whatever that most impactful section is, and then we'd move to the next section and kind of do that same cycle or sprint on that particular section. So we kind of went section by section. So in that way, it's not necessarily, I mean, it's not straight agile for sure, but it's not necessarily like a hard waterfall where you're doing the entire site at once. We would break it section by section, and even within each one of those sections, we would do page by page. So we would say, okay, for this page, we're going to do a sprint, and if it's a product page, we're going to do a sprint on the product page and get it done from start to finish and launch it. And then that way, you're still working a little bit more agile, and you're working in phases, but not necessarily having to do like a strict waterfall where you're doing a like, big project. And then the other cool thing is that you can start collecting feedback a lot quicker because it's on a live site versus in like a dev environment as well. So that may be another approach for a particular client if that makes sense and is a good fit.